All right, welcome back to the Beat Broadcast, Episode 5. My name is John Henry Dale.
I'm Jesse.
And we are talking about a very heavy subject in the drumming world. So I don't know, I was a little afraid to take this one on, but but we must, because he's a legend in the drumming world, and probably one of the first drummers I ever kind of really got into as a kid, and sort of an honorary namesake for myself, and that is John Henry Bonham, a.k.a. Bonzo. Also, as I found out, a.k.a. The Beast.
Oh, yeah.
The rhythmic force of nature behind Led Zeppelin, as many of you probably know. Whether you like them or hate them, some people are very divided on Led Zeppelin. Their influence is obviously massive on the whole history of classic rock, metal, heavy rock. I don't know what you want to call it, kind of bluesy rock. They were kind of the soundtrack to a large portion of my childhood. What was it? It was Bonham's birthday on Sunday?
Yes, the 31st.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
May 31st. So...
born in 1948, passed away September 1980.
Okay.
Pretty tragic death, early death.
How old was he?
32.
Wow.
Which is pretty incredible considering the impact that he left on rock.
Yeah.
You know. He died from complications from drinking. It's pretty tragic.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to go into all those gory details, but definitely an influence on both of us and lots of other drummers out there, like you were saying, and like you're saying, I agree with what you're saying about people are on the fence about Zeppelin. I happen to be a big fan.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't listen to them as much as I used to when I was a kid, or even kid, young adult, through my 20s. At a certain point, it was just kind of like I had heard everything, and it was like, all right, that's that. That'll just, But it's certainly a foundational influence on my own drumming, for sure. And part of that is because one of the first albums I think I ever bought, like on my own, was a cassette tape of Houses of the Holy. I think this was like 86, somewhere around there.
Uh-huh.
And my dad and my sister and I went on this sort of epic road trip in a VW Vanagon, from like the DC area all the way down to an Esperanto conference in North Carolina. And we took the Blue Ridge Parkway the entire way, which is a really slow way to get down to North Carolina from Washington, D.C. or West Virginia, where we were leaving from, I guess. But it was really, really memorable. And we had like 3 albums the entire time to listen to. And we listened to them on repeat. One was, I think, Oxygen 2 by Jean-Michel Jarre, the electronic artist. The other was Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull.
Okay.
And then the third one was Houses of the Holy. And we just like wore out those cassettes. I mean, just over and over and over. So that album really just kind of just is like indelibly imprinted in my brain, and so that was kind of my real first exposure to John Bonham. And I wasn't really a drummer at that point even. It was just
it's weird. I did grow up with my dad who's a drummer, and we always talked about Bonham, and definitely we talked about some licks, but I don't ever remember really hearing us playing the album so much when I was a kid. I wasn't super into him. I was listening to a lot of other stuff, but I remember being in high school, and I was working at the Video Den. And
wait, where is that? That's
yes.
not a West Virginia thing. I thought that was.
That's some ancient. I actually grew up in Maryland, right? So this was
Video Den in Maryland.
Yeah, Video Den in Maryland, and ancient technology. And I remember hearing Dazed and Confused was on the radio. We always had like the rock radio on in the video den. And some dude came up to me, some older guy, he's like, "Man, I've been partying and listening to this song since before you were born." And I thought, man, this band's probably pretty cool. And so then I kind of started paying a little more attention. You know, I always knew Stairway, you know, that was the hit. That was for me the big hit, especially when I was young.
Sure.
I remember we were in high school and we had a band and we had rented the VFW hall, right? To have Foreign Wars, to have a we were like, I was probably a junior in high school, and we maybe younger, and actually I remember my parents drove me, so I was probably like 15, and so we rented the hall somehow. They rented to a bunch of kids, and like half our high school showed up, right? I think we charged like $2 to get in. I don't remember, and I do remember the end of the gig we made like $600, and that was like we were rich.
Whoa!
Right? We were like, holy smokes, we can make
$600 on a gig when you were like
high school. Not each, right?
I know,
but still, for 5 guys, we were like, man, this is awesome.
Most bands these days now would like to get that.
I know, the pay rate hasn't changed, but so we're, you know, it was, and like everyone's going crazy. I remember my dad was there, and the guys were like, it's the end of the show, and they're like, one more. So of course, you know, we had 2 guitar players in the band, and they're like, we're doing Stairway.
Oh God.
And I'm like, I don't know Stairway. Like I think we had taken a set break and decided we were going to do this, and it came up, and I remember my dad going, it's real easy. You're just going to rest for like 5 minutes. He's like, when I point at you, just start playing. So we did it, and we got halfway through, and came right in on it, and you know, everyone loved it, and it was awesome, and you know,
wow.
And that was
you played
like
Stairway to Heaven with your dad.
No, my dad was in the audience telling me when to start playing. He's like, go, because I had no clue. I'm like, I don't even know what verse to. Where do I start? It's like, it's gonna be about, you just rest for 5 minutes, and then you're gonna start.
That's funny.
And you know, so I think that was probably the only time I ever played Stairway on a gig, ever. You know.
Yeah. Do you need to play Stairway on a gig? You know,
No,
it's like,
I don't think so. I mean, people probably yell it, but
it's like the Wayne's World, you know, kind of cliche. It's like no Stairway. That was never my favorite song from them, to be honest. I always appreciated it, but it always felt a bit like, you know, a bit too sweet and syrupy and kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was something about it. It was a little too ballady. I wasn't into that sort of sound, but.
Right. I like the like trippy stuff, you know, and the real heavy stuff. That was really getting me, and you know, definitely, and then you know, Bonham just had this vibe, and you know,
like, what do you? I mean, if you had to describe him, what would you describe his vibe like? Cause
well, you know, heavy.
We kind of references a little bit in a previous episode.
Yes, I think it does, and it's heavy. And we had talked about this in another episode about he sometimes had this feel that was somewhere between straight and swing, and it just was greasy. And we were talking about some of the other drummers who are doing that, but you can definitely hear it in the stuff. It kind of swings. Some of it swings more than other. I mean, remember Zeppelin was real into like you know, the blues, you know, and definitely a major influence on them. So pretty cool. And then Bonham, I mean, might as well dive into this a little bit. You know, Bonham's big influence were Max Roach, Gene Krupa, and Buddy Rich. Now those guys, you know, definitely you hear some of the, especially in his big solos. You're hearing that stuff. But his other major influence was Carmine Appice. And Carmine... Right? And from Vanilla Fudge.
Vanilla Fudge. And
at the time,
what else did he play with?
Well, he played with Rod Stewart.
Okay.
He played with Jeff Beck.
Dude. Right.
He's played with a bunch of different groups.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Fudge.
So... I was actually watching an interview with Carmine, and it was saying that this is really kind of interesting because we can talk about we're going to talk about this drums a little later, maybe, but you know, Bonham later played Ludwig drums, and
Right.
Big Ludwig drums.
Yeah.
And at the time, Carmine was playing Ludwig drums. Big Ludwig drums. 26-inch, huge tom-toms. You know,
Right.
Carmine had the 20-inch kick drum turned on its side using it like a floor tom. Well
Right.
before guys were, now we got gong drums and stuff. But like, you know, big
Wait,
drums.
Carmine would turn a 20-inch bass drum on its
Just
side
make it a
and use
floor
it-
tom. I mean, they
Yeah.
kind of built that kit for him. Just massive shells.
Yeah.
And so what was happening was Zeppelin on their first tour was opening for Vanilla Fudge. Okay? And they, you know, toured all over the place, and Carmine and Bonham became good buddies.
Huh.
And
Nice.
he was like, man, this dude is killing, you know, he respected him. And so Bonham was like, man, I really love your drum sound. Up until that point, Bonham was playing premieres a lot. Remember, he's British, right? So he's playing these premieres.
Right.
And
Which is, for those of you who don't know, a British drum manufacturer.
Right.
One of
Here's
the few. There's not a lot.
here's a set right
Yeah.
here.
Oh, nice.
And part of a set. Anyways, yeah, so he's told Carmine, he's like, can you talk to your people at Ludwig and see if you can hook me up? So
Right.
Carmine
Like with
calls
the
Ludwig.
sponsorship? Does
Yes.
that mean like hook him up?
Yes,
with being
hook
a
him up.
sponsored
So-
drummer
Yes, endorsed him.
or
So
endorsed, right?
Carmine calls Ludwig, says, look, we got this band. I think you're going to dig them. They've been touring with us. The drummer loves my drums. He wants a kit. Check it out. Gives them
Yeah.
their album. The guys at Ludwig are like, heck yeah. They
Yeah.
make Bonham, they give him the new Ludwigs that he, you know, started out playing on. It said that he
Right.
gave him 2 identical kits.
Nice.
Right? Probably
One
one for
for-
touring, or maybe one was Europe and one was North America or something.
Right.
But 26-inch bass drum, the big drums that we know, you know, remembered Bonham really playing, those big
Right.
shells,
Yeah.
maple shells.
Okay, so and just as a side note, what you're looking at right here, the drum kit I've played for 20 years now, literally, probably as of like today, actually, I've had this kit for 20 years because my mom and my stepdad got this kit for me for my graduation. More than 21 years ago because I graduated in '99, and this is a 1976 Ludwig Maple Classic. Which is a variant of some, or at least I think Bonham played something similar, maybe with a bigger bass drum. But what you're looking at here is kind of very, very similar to some of the drums that he played
Yes.
maybe in the earlier days. And then I think he got into Vista Lights
Into-
later,
Yeah, to those amber Vista lights,
which were the acrylic or some kind of
Acrylic,
plastic.
clear drums, if you
shell.
don't know. Right. Acrylic, I think.
When did those come out, though? the Vista
I don't
Lights,
know.
though?
I
Was
don't
it-
know that information.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe
Anyway.
if someone's watching, maybe somebody knows. We need a fact checker on this program, I guess.
Yeah, we need Jamie. We need, like, anyway.
So, anyways, we don't need to go there. So, yeah, so pretty cool that Carmine hooked him up. And if you listen to Carmine's playing and you listen to Bonham, you can really hear the similarities.
I'll admit I've not heard. I mean, I really am not that familiar with Carmine.
Yeah, and the thing about Carmine too, I think, was he played big drums and he hit really hard,
right?
and more so than like guys like Mitch Mitchell at that time, or like even Ginger Baker. Right, Carmine was really just destroying, just beating the heck out of drums, and that was part of his sound. And Bonham really related to that, and you hear that in the Zeppelin stuff. You know, I did see. I did read, or I saw an interview with Carmine. He said that Bonham gave his son, Jason Bonham, who is a great drummer now, but gave him the Carmine's book when he was a kid, Realistic
okay.
Rock, which is a
Realistic
good,
Rock.
great book. I even do that with some of my students. And some of the Bonham licks that we're going to talk about here in a minute are in that Carmine book, like
Okay.
note for note.
Wow.
And which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
and,
that's super cool.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting how those two were connected like that.
Yeah, I really didn't realize the connection until this week when you kind of started hipping me to that. That's cool.
Yeah,
I got to do some more research.
yeah, it's pretty hip. So, cool. So I guess we could move on down the line here. So one thing we were going to talk about maybe is, or at least I wanted to talk about and maybe do a little playing here was, you know, the thing about Bonham that kind of stuck with me, and I think most drummers recognize the tune, is Moby Dick, and which is basically a drum solo with some riffs on the front and the back of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a blues like 1-4-5 kind of thing.
And
like,
but a big solo. If you listen to it on the album, it's about, I don't know, 3-minute solo. If you watch the movie, the movie Song Remains the Same, it's about 10 minutes.
Sure, yeah.
I found some YouTubes where they're like 20-minute solos.
Yeah, there's all kinds of
now.
outtakes of Moby
One
Dick.
thing for me as a young drummer, listening to this solo, picking up on it, you know, this is before I really got into jazz and really started listening to some of these guys like Gene Krupa or Buddy Rich or Joe Morello.
Mm-hmm.
Bonham was doing a lot of these things within his solo that a lot of these jazz guys were doing. Big Tom things, you know, very expressive, creating some space. You know, different textures, kind of going back to what we talked about on a couple episodes back about occupying these different spaces on the drum set and kind of taking us on a bit of a journey before he brings it back. He was really cool with that. And especially later when he started playing the much bigger drum set, you know, he had congas off the side. He had timpani.
Right.
You know, he had the gong. Right,
I mean, I don't know if you know, what era or what years was that? Do you know when he really started kind of getting into the?
Well, I think that was like late 70s.
Okay. Yeah.
And, you know, the kits were getting bigger. I think Zeppelin was getting, well, they were at the top of the game, really. And so part of it too is, you know, when you're having these massive tours like that, you can afford to haul around a, you know, 40-inch gong and timpani. Right, you got tractor trailers and everything else. Yeah. So, and then of course, you know, in his solos, he'd do a bunch of cool stuff. You know, he was famous for playing that barehanded solo.
Right.
You know, barehanded stuff where, you know, right, all that very expressive, little finger rolls, you know, on the drums, and then again off the congas. And the congas were cool because they, especially was doing that, they blended right in, you know. And then, you know, with the timpani, he'd have like phalange or something on it, just make them sound totally wild.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is super cool, you know, super cool. And then of course, you know, his really famous Bonham sort of triplet that he would do. Yeah. This thing. Right, and so the Bonham version of that, he would play, and the sticking of that is just a left-right kick, which is, you know, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I, you know, the thing I think I dig about that a lot is it's descending if you stick it that way. You know, if you stick it with the left-right kick, right. And, you know, we hear Bonham playing that through a bunch of stuff. Not just in Moby Dick.
Moby Dick, yeah.
So anyways, all right, well, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a little jam off of that, off that riff. And we'll see how it goes. I'm just going to kind of wing one. I'm not going to try and play it note for note. Plenty of guys have done that, tried to do that before. Yeah. And that's not what this is about. I think what the takeaway on this is, what can we take from these guys and how can we make it our own and how can we, you know, incorporate it into what we're doing, just like everything we listen to. All right, so let's see here.
There you go.
Yeah. Been chopping some wood working on that one this week.
Moby
We'll see what-
Jesse.
Yeah, man. So, anyways,
dope. That's
super
dope.
cool, man. You know, and for me, that was just like I'm trying to take snippets from the ideas that Bonham did on that solo. You know, I'm trying to again take it to places like we talked about a couple weeks ago, and it's
Yeah.
fun, and it gives you some. You know, you're telling a story,
Yeah.
trying to at least you're trying to move through maybe some scenes as you're going. It's not just, you know, hopefully, doesn't sound
Yeah, I mean,
just bashing.
To me, yeah, Moby Dick to me it was probably one of the first like drum solos I ever heard. You know, and it's just got it's very memorable. I think because so much of it is reliant on dynamics. You know, and he's playing with his fingers at certain points, and then he's getting into this, you know, the kind of triplet, you know, tom, bass drum, you know, snare, sort of like, you know,
Yes.
You know, and it's like,
Yeah, and that's the thing is you can sing that solo
yeah, you can
the
sing
same way
exactly.
you can
It's
like a trumpet solo
Exactly.
or you know a guitar solo, a great
Yeah.
solo.
Yeah, so I mean his sound on that and on tracks like, you know, When the Levee Breaks are not only just, you know, epic in their own right, but they've just been sampled like
Yes.
you know, endlessly.
Well, I think we should talk
And-
about Levy. I think this is a great way to get
Right.
into this.
Right.
So, you know, the thing about Levy is it's got that incredible reverb on it.
Right.
That sort of natural echo. And we've been talking about this, you know, off air.
Oh,
and
hold up a sec. Keep going. But I realize I gotta plug in my computer. Hold on.
And so, what, you know, there's a lot of these sort of like urban legends about how this Levy was actually recorded. But after doing some research, I think we kind of got to the bottom of it. And so they had recorded it in the lobby of Headley Grange. It's where they were recording the album. And
Which I think used to be a mental institution.
Oh,
or
really?
Something.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it was, or some sort of like halfway house, or some kind of like, you know, place for just wayward youth,
Right.
or maybe mentally ill people in the UK, and
That's
was
interesting.
used by a bunch of bands actually.
Bands rented it, huh? Yeah. Well, apparently they they had a room that they were doing most of the tracking in, and I can't remember the engineer's name. It's one of the guys who did the Stones. They actually had the Rolling Stones like mobile truck
Right.
there recording the album, and they decided they drug the drum set out into the basically lobby, which was this sort of like super high ceiling big room. And what they did is they set the drums up in the middle of the room and they put two overheads on the second floor, and it really got that natural reverb, and
Yeah.
they were able to capture the thing. So when you hear that Levy does do go go, right, that kick on the front, that's just a quarter note with that slap back boom, right? But it's just he's really just playing boom. It's just a
Yeah, so
quarter
it's
note,
like-
but that echo makes it sound like it's that extra beat.
So,
Right. So
like that sound is kind of just imprinted
right.
on our
So
brains, right?
right. And one thing the engineer said that Bonham, that was like the happiest Bonham ever was with his drum sound. That he didn't really like his drum sound on the recordings, but he loved that.
Yeah.
And which I thought was pretty cool.
Was that Glenn Johns who did that recording?
I don't know his name, but man,
Well, you know,
is
Glenn
he
Johns
the
was-
Stones guy?
Well, he may have worked with the Stones, but I know he's famous for being one of the, you know, principal sort of sound and recording engineers for Led Zeppelin's, you know, 70s.
Okay.
A lot of their stuff in the 70s. And Glenn Johns' son is actually a producer himself in Nashville, and you know, there's a whole kind of side parallel recording family lineage there with Glenn Johns and his son.
Interesting.
And I think his son has maybe worked with like the Raconteurs and some other kind of like Black Keys, that kind of sound.
Okay. So
But,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, what I was getting to was that that Levy beat, it's thick and it's definitely like an awesome rock tune.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's a blues tune that they kind of reworked, but
that's right. That's right.
But
They did,
the thing is that groove has been sampled a ton by hip hop artists and other artists. So, like some of the places we heard it was on Beastie Boys, Rhymin' and Stealin'. They use that groove. It's on Dr. Dre's The Chronic. It's on MC Light. It's on Bjork's Army of Me, which I never knew.
Right.
But then I listened to the Bjork track and I was like, holy smokes, there it is.
Totally that. Yeah, it's not the same exact groove.
No, they
but
cut it.
They cut up the drum samples or whatever of the snares.
And then Massive Attack used it. And I mean, and I think that's pretty cool, that I mean, it is a great groove.
Yeah.
And I think this gets us into our next topic is that you've got the sample pack loaded onto your Ableton there.
Ableton Push, yeah.
On your Ableton Push.
So, yes, I do. And you maybe heard just a little bit of it just there a couple minutes ago. So Ableton Push, and I'm sorry I don't have the top camera for this, but you can see this is basically just a grid controller. It's a MIDI controller for Ableton, which is one of the, kind of industry standard DAWs, as well as like live performance and sequencing software. So the Push is a big 64-pad MIDI sequencer. So I've got, I'm running a software instrument called Steven Slate Drums, and they actually have like a sampled kind of Led Zeppelin style kit. Basically, I think they just completely, recreated his whole kit with either the Superlight or the Acrolite steel snare, and then just like the 26-inch bass drum. They basically sampled a whole kit and then created a preset out of it. So I was going to do like a little kind of modern digital take on Bonham's solo. So let me see what I can get into here. So
yeah, that snare drum on that is sick.
It's a really good. Yeah,
I mean, if you close your eyes, it is so cool.
Yeah, it's unfortunately I didn't have the mapping set up right to where I'm used to for finger drumming. Usually finger drumming you kind of do it within a 16 4x4 grid, and this thing's spread all over the 64 pad, kind of layout. So it's a little different than my normal. So pardon the kind of.
I wanted to tell you. I was watching as I was going down the John Bonham rabbit hole on YouTube.
Yeah.
I watched this video of Jason Bonham on the Howard Stern show. Okay, with his He's got like a Zeppelin band. I can't remember the name of it, but they do
Yeah.
a bunch of Zeppelin stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, he had the same your Roland pad. I can't remember the name of that thing, the one over by your hi-hat. He
Like
had
an SPD.
he was playing that in the
SPDSX.
studio. Yes, with the sample pack on that. And
No,
with the bass drum.
of his dad's.
Yes,
drum
it was
sound?
crazy. And he had a foot pedal for it, so he could play a bass drum. But it was so I was like, holy smokes, this cat, because they're just going into some like, sound studio in New York or wherever they do Howard Stern. I guess it's easier to carry that thing up the elevator than it is his big drum set.
Oh, so that's all he had.
Yeah, it's all he had.
No
And the
way.
full band, the guys had their guitars.
And did he have like a little digital kick?
He had a
pedal
little
for
kick
it and
pedal.
stuff?
It
No
was so
way.
cool, man.
I got to check that out.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find
Yeah,
that link.
Jason
Maybe I can put it on the
Bonham's-
page.
Jason Bonham is sort of like, he's kind of lived in his dad's shadow in a way.
Yeah.
I think he's really trying to honor him and stuff, but it's like so much of his career has been about being John Bonham's son, and it seems like, he's always been sort of trying to revive, Led Zeppelin, and I think there's been various points at which, it might have just been about to happen with him and the rest of the guys, but I think recently, I don't know, maybe as recently as like 2015, they had somewhere along the lines of like $500 million on the table.
Wow.
I
For
think from
every
Richard
well, I don't
Branson or
think
some
Page and Plan don't want to
conglomerate.
do it. I don't think they want to do
No,
it.
they had everyone on board except for Robert Plant, and Jason
Oh.
Bonham was going to be the drummer, and I think he did play with them in Wembley Arena in London in '07. I was living in Scotland at the time, and I remember when tickets went on sale for that, and it was like you couldn't get tickets. All you could do was try to get into the lottery to get tickets,
Yeah,
and that
okay.
lottery for those tickets was like closed in like 2 minutes or so. It was insane. It was like there's no way you're getting these tickets. I tried,
Wow.
because it was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I know.
didn't happen. And so that was one show. But then like whatever 7-8 years later, it was potentially in the works for them to do like some probably last world.
Well, they did. They got in the
hurrah
Rock and Roll
kinda
Hall of
tour.
Fame.
And it just so let me finish here. Like,
Oh, sorry.
basically, like they're on the table with this deal, and apparently, like in the room, Robert Plant is just like, I don't know if he ripped up the deal or if he was just like, I'm not going to do it. And it kind of like begs the question of like, okay, well, how did it even get to that point of like,
Right. Why are you wasting everyone's time?
why are you wasting everyone's
Or
time?
maybe they
And,
said if we
you
hit him with
know,
50 mil, maybe he'll say yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, so I don't even know how they got him in the room if he was so, kind of already opposed or just, whatever. To doing
Right.
it. But in the end, Robert Plant kind of put the kibosh on it, and it was like, you can't do a Led Zeppelin tour without Robert Plant.
That's it.
And I felt so bad for Jason Bonham at that point because I was like, man, this dude, it's like he's been, he had learned everything, and it's like you could tell it was like this would have been this just amazing, life altering experience. But I think in the
yeah.
end, Plant was kind of like,
We
I
shut it
don't
down.
want to be that band. I don't want to be the old fogies doing the grab the money reunion
And I
tour.
respect that. I
know?
respect that because when Bonham died, the band stopped. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And
And he died
Car-
in '83. I didn't realize he died so late. It was '83.
well, they didn't. They hadn't played for like 2 years when he died, or
no,
or
I'm
they
sorry.
weren't.
No,
they
I'm
weren't
sorry.
playing
It's
much.
80. It's not.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. It's 1980. It was,
Yeah, 1980. But they hadn't played. They were gearing up to go back on tour and stuff.
Right.
And he didn't die on tour. He died basically after a rehearsal.
Yeah.
But I did see that Carmine was the number one guy to be the replacement if they were going to go on. They were going to call him.
Oh wow.
And Carmine even said it was between him and Cozy Powell. And I don't know, and then I
Wait.
think Robert Plant was just like, this is it. We're done.
We're done.
And
But they did Live Aid though in '85.
Oh, really? Was
Yeah,
it
but
Zeppelin or was it Page and
But
Plant?
no, it was Zeppelin, and I mean I don't know if it was as Led Zeppelin, but yeah, they definitely played. And I don't want to get my facts wrong and be a total idiot here. So let me double check this. So you keep going.
Okay.
And let me.
So we'll keep going on. So I think we can So, anyways, yeah. So it's John Baum's birthday. Pretty cool, and we thought we had to touch on that as part of the program. Also, a little
Yeah.
side note: today is Curtis Mayfield's birthday. How about
Hell
that?
yeah.
You gotta love Curtis
Wow.
Mayfield. We love the funk
Yeah.
too. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Anywho,
Happy
so
birthday, Curtis Mayfield.
yes, totally. And anyways, we want to thank everybody. We're not quite done yet. We're going to move on to our next topic, but thank everybody for tuning in. If you got questions, please comment. Let us know you're here. Share the page. Subscribe. Like us on Facebook, YouTube. And we have the almighty tip bucket if you're feeling generous. And we do
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Phil Collins.
Phil Collins was a drummer.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
Neat.
think it was not well received, though. I'm looking at this article, Phil Collins on his disastrous Led Zeppelin performance. If I could have walked off, I would have done. He
Wow.
said, I wasn't needed, and I felt like a spare part.
No kidding.
That's
I
harsh.
mean, that's apples and oranges for me, man.
Yeah, I can't.
Phil Collins was probably there,
Yeah.
He was there at Live Aid. And
Yeah, it said the majority of Collins' rehearsal came from listening to the band song On the Flight Over, as the former Genesis singer and drummer recalls. I didn't rehearse, and when I got there, but I listened to Stairway to Heaven on Concorde. I guess he meant the Concorde plane.
well, he needed his dad there telling him when to kick it off, I guess.
Yeah. His son's a drummer. Phil Collins' son is a drummer.
Oh, I didn't know
Speaking of
that.
son drummers. I arrived and went to the caravans, and Robert said, Jimmy Page is belligerent. After being quizzed by Page on how to play Stairway to Heaven, Collins explained that the legendary guitarist wasn't impressed. I sort of mimes the Stairway to Heaven drum part, and Page says, no, it doesn't. It doesn't go like that. So I had a word with co-drummer Tony Thompson, because I've played as two drummers a lot, and it can be a train wreck. And I said, let's stay out of each other's way and play simple. Robert Plant wasn't match fit. I think that means he wasn't, ready for the mat, ready for the game.
Yes.
And if I could have walked off, I would have done, because I wasn't needed and I felt like a spare part.
Yeah.
Phil Collins also spoke how he didn't want the job of taking over. Anyway, Genesis drum.
Yeah, here we go.
Phil Collins and then Tony.
I wonder if that was who was playing with Phil Collins' band.
Thompson. Yeah, could well
Could
be.
have been.
That's another rabbit hole to go down. So
Yeah.
So they had one performance in like '85, and
Wow.
then,
And they
that was
only
it.
did Stairway? It was just one song?
No, they did a whole set.
Okay.
You can watch the.
Should
set.
look that up on
watch the
YouTube. I'm
live
sure it's
video.
out there.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool.
So what else we got?
Yeah, so I think we can move on, man.
It's
Let's
after
go.
25 minutes on Bonham. But,
It's
I
all
mean,
good,
come
man.
On. The
It's all
guy's
good.
like super. He's super influential on both of us. So I think it's.
Yeah.
I think it's and hey, it's like it's another John Henry. So
Yeah, there you go.
I got.
I mean, that probably, sure.
Yeah.
So, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about a topic that's been kind of hot, sort of. And if anybody's out there watching who's definitely into the marching band sort of scene,
Yeah.
modes, this is something we talk about. And that is the concept of the grid, drum grid.
Right.
And it's really started to catch on now, especially with things like Grid Book Nation. You can check them out. They've got a killer Instagram page, lots of cool exercises, and guys just doing crazy stuff on the snare drum that I can't even approach. I mean,
Right.
and beyond the tricks, just the sticking and everything is top notch. But this is something I've been talking about my students with as we're preparing for potentially fall marching band season, and talking about the concept of the grid. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with grid, I'm just going to share a image here. But the idea is you take, maybe we have a grid of, let's say, just 16th notes, okay? 16 bars of 16th notes, and we have one sort of incidental that's happening on the beat. So whether that is a accent or a diddle or a flam, that element will sort of migrate through the bar to a different part of the beat. Okay, and let me just give you a visual. You're gonna have to let me share, buddy. And
Oh, whoops.
and
Is that not-
So the idea is you take this. We'll do it with an accent. That's probably one of the easiest ones.
Okay, you should be good. Try it now.
Okay, so here's our diddle. See if I can blow that up for you. This
Nice.
this is just a diddle sheet. Notice here we have a bar rack of 16th notes. Here we have a diddle on the downbeat, 1 E and 2 E and then here on the second line, it's now migrated over to the E, then to the and then finally in the fourth bar it goes to the Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm gonna play this real simple. I won't play it with I'll play it with an accent in front of a diddle, and I think it's a lot easier to learn it in accents first before you learn it in the diddle.
Yeah.
So
And so for people who don't know or just tuning in or maybe not drummers, diddle is just a little 2-beat kind of accent, right?
it's a
And then-
roll. It's a double stroke.
It's a double stroke.
If I had a solid bar with those slashes on it on all the 16th notes, it would sound like a double stroke roll. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Now,
Right.
I should say we can put grids over any sort of patterns. It doesn't have to be straight 16th notes. It can be broken. It can be
Yeah.
sextuplets, triplets, whatever. So, anyways, here's the grid. I'll play it as accents. Okay, now let me turn that off. We'll get back to business. Now, the idea there with that is, and I was working on that with a lot of students, and they're playing that straight down, and so forth, or okay, and we're moving that through it, or maybe a flam. Okay, and then I was like, how do we apply this grid concept to the drum set? Right, and I do have a lot of students who not only march, but they're playing, rock or jazz or whatever. It's like, man, we're spending all this time learning stuff for the marching band. Well, how can we pull that back into the drum set? And I think this is a cool thing, and it turns into some cool licks. So first thing I would say is put that against 4 on the floor bass drum, maybe 2 and 4 hi-hat pedal, right? Play the whole thing. Okay, and so that
Let
would
me
be
slow that down. Let me slow that down a bit. So you're doing like.
Yep,
Is
I'm
it-
playing
or-
accent. 1 E and a 2, 3, 4, E and a E. And okay,
So
I'm sliding
but
that through the bar.
That's not a diddle though. That's just an accent. Right?
It's just an accent.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the way I apply that, one of the ways phone's ringing. One of the ways I apply that.
Is that you?
Somebody's trying to call
Doesn't
me.
sound like my
Okay.
iPhone.
I don't know. It was weird. It was Facebook, I think. Okay. All right. So what?
Uh oh.
Go away. All right.
Gonna
So
put that on Do Not Disturb, buddy.
I'm telling you. So one of the ways to apply this, right, is I can play this. If it's a right-hand accent, I'm going to play the floor tom. It's a left-hand accent, I'm going to put it up top on the rack. So here's that drill again. Okay, it's already starting to sound pretty cool.
Right.
Now, the way I decide, but you can't really. You could use that in a solo, I guess. But
Yeah.
one of the ways I've learned to use it is I take the entire grid of the 16 bars and I condense it into one measure. So I'm taking an element from each part of the grid and putting it over one beat. So I'm going through that cycle in one bar. So that sounds like this. Okay, I'll put that in time. Okay, so that's starting to sound like something. Now, what I started doing from there is going, how else can I voice this? How else can I orchestrate it? Right? So, tons of ways. Here's just a couple simple. I'll just roll through a few. sometimes when I play it into the cymbals, I would say I like to double the accent with my kick drum. Okay, so instead of just playing straight 4 on the floor here, I double down on those hits. So I like to do it off the hi-hat sometimes, so like something like this. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1. Okay, see where that's going? And that, so I'll just give you a couple examples. Again, some of the tricks we talked about on the previous episodes, I can push and pull this. I can bring that accenting inner or outer like we had talked about. So here, I'll give you a couple examples. Super cool, right? And then we can go from there. You know, we can make that a diddle, like we were saying. Right? I can make all the notes around the accent a roll or diddles. And so I can play something like this. So. Now I can, and I just kind of tweak that a little bit. Now the idea here too is I don't have to play 1 E and grid. I can play that in reverse, E and 1. I can play it scrambled. You know, so meaning like maybe 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E. You know, I can move them. They don't have to live in their normal spot. So
Yeah, sure.
yeah, so maybe, you know, if you guys are already messing with grids and the concept of gridding, you know, I challenge everybody, take it to the drum set. You know, do it over triplets, sextuplets. It's great for. You know, I can start moving around. It's great for jazz. If I'm playing a triplet thing, I can swing it. Again, I can roll it. And it's really, you're limited only by your creativity on that and how I can voice it and how I can play those little incidentals, you know, flam, diddle, accent, you know.
Nice.
You could play rim shots, whatever. So, you know, I thought that was something cool, share with some people. And some people asked me to explain that, so I thought I'd go ahead and do that.
Did Gridbook kind of evolve out of the drum corps scene?
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
What? Okay.
Yes.
Because I know I've seen the Instagram, like Gridbook Nation, and you just see these, you know, people playing these just
shredding.
Like,
I know.
It's almost like, I mean, it's so mechanically, like, perfect, you know, that it's almost kind of like, I mean, for me anyway, at this point, I think probably unobtainable unless I just, you know, got
buckle
back into
down.
a place in my life where I was able to like practice 8 hours a day. But
sure.
But it's so impressive, and not just that, but like I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've watched DCI championships and stuff with these bands. I mean, it is just mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling the level of rhythmic complexity that they're playing. And while they're doing like the most insanely orchestrated, you know, dance and steps and marches across and doing all the, I mean, it is just like I think it's like the highest almost form of like drumming art in a certain, it's like, I mean, I don't want to say that like in some definitive way. I mean, there's so many different ways you can express yourself on drums and percussion, and it's I think it's an essential human experience to actually play percussion. But that to me is like, it's like that's the sort of the mechanical, you know, apex and the technique apex of it, where it's just come together and you know, so in just this way that's like, it's actually really beautiful to watch.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a performance.
It's not just like virtuosically impressive. It's like really like moving to watch that kind of orchestration of humans together in a you know, in a musical and dance. It's music, it's dance, it's you know, band orchestration, it's arrangement, it's you know, it's incredible physical discipline. And you know, so just yeah, props to anybody who's like out there in those DCI bands, you know, making the championships happen. I worked with a guy at New World Symphony, Jack Minsutani. I think he teaches for the Blue Devils. There's Blue something. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting that, Jack. But anyway, he's like out there every summer and like helping those guys practice. And it's like some of the stuff I see them do is it's. Anyway, if you want to have your mind blown, go check out Grid Book Nation. Check out the DCI Championships.
Yeah, totally.
Just gonna be completely flabbergasted by that kind of the skill that's on display with those guys. And
well,
girls.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's probably about do us for tonight, bud.
Yeah, I think so.
We would like to urge everybody to please check out our YouTube, subscribe, like the page, share it. We appreciate all your comments and your tips. We do appreciate that.
Yeah, paypal.me/beatbroadcast. If you feel like contributing to the tip bucket for Jesse or I. One last thing. We are going to move to a bi-weekly format. So we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks instead of every week, which is maybe a more realistic schedule as we start getting back into maybe opening up society again, and maybe
hopefully
maybe we'll even have a gig or something this summer.
Maybe wouldn't that be something? So yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks, potentially on Tuesday. That's what we're shooting for. I don't have that date in front of me.
Right. Also, and if anybody has any good subjects that they want to see, drummers they want to see, we are like all ears. I mean, this is just stuff that we've tended to structure based around birthdays and deaths, sadly. But we think it's important to honor our sort of ancestors and our drumming heroes as much as we want to talk about current stuff too. So that'll be a regular part of the show. But anyway, if you guys have any comments on drummers you'd like to see featured or drumming subjects. Or other stuff too. I mean, it doesn't have to be all drums. We can talk about sequencing if you want to get into some Ableton beat sequencing tutorial stuff or playing live drums with your fingers.
There you go, man.
I'm your man. So let us know. We're down for finger drumming. We're down for stick drumming. We're down for all of it.
Yeah, air drumming.
Air drumming even.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, once again, thank you all very much. And this is the Beat Broadcast, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Everyone, be safe out there. Peace.
Yeah. All right. Peace.